Thank you for being here. My name is Paul Mirando. I'm the Chief Curator here at the National Army Museum, and it's an honor to welcome you to our Vietnam War Symposium here in beautiful Veterans Hall. And as you can tell from the handouts that you got, that the overall theme of the symposium is history and memory. Of course, my job here is to interpret historic artifacts, find ways to educate the public about the Army's history through artifacts. In some ways, history and memory is a large part of what I do. And today, we have 3 separate presentations that look at objects from 3 different perspectives. First, we have Jim Knotts. He'll talk about a traveling display that he put together that looks at the Vietnam Wall, but also the objects that were left there. Next, we have 3 of our own volunteers here at the museum, Bob Dunn, Miguel Monteverde, and Marcy Neuendorf. They will be discussing their personal items that they had during the Vietnam War. They'll highlight what these meant to them, very powerful stories. And then concluding our program is Jonathan Bernstein. He's a curator and a friend, and he's going to talk about saving a very important helicopter that served during the Vietnam War. Now, while these presentations seem very different, they all connect to our theme of history and memory. And they do it in a very profound way by using objects as the central focus. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Jim Knotts. Jim is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, and he's a veteran of the Persian Gulf War. He has also served as CEO of 2 national military support nonprofits, including the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund for the past 8 years. I had the chance to work with Jim on bringing in a traveling display. It's called Panel 44, 8 Days in March, which is currently on display here at the museum downstairs in our main galleries. So after today's programs, I encourage you to take a look, go down into our galleries, and I believe Jim is going to be, kind of doing a tour of that anyway. And so that is what he's going to be talking to us now. So Jim, please come on up.
Well, hi, everyone. First of all, I have to just ask, how many Vietnam veterans do we have here today? All right, that's a lot of them. To all of you, welcome home. And I also want to point out a couple of other people who are here today. Bill Schugerts, can you wave your hand back there? Bill and Keith June and Bob Fano. These folks are also volunteers who work at the wall up in Washington, D.C., and we so appreciate all of their efforts in coming up and helping about 5 million visitors a year understand what that memorial means and learn a little bit about the history of the Vietnam War and the impact that it still has on all of us today. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of an overview about the memorial.
In 1980, the nonprofit Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, or VVMF, was authorized by Congress to fund and build a memorial on the National Mall to honor all those who served in Vietnam. A design contest was held, and 1,421 entries were reviewed. VVMF set 4 criteria for the design. It had to be reflective and contemplative in character. It had to be harmonious with its surroundings. It could make no political statements about the war, and it had to contain the names. A panel of judges unanimously declared the winner to be 21-year-old Yale undergrad Maya Lin. Lin conceived her design as creating a park within a park, a quiet, protected place unto itself. She chose polished black granite for the walls, so its mirror-like surface would reflect the images of its surroundings. The wall was dedicated on November 13, 1982, and is the main component of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. The site now includes the 3 servicemen statue, the Vietnam Women's Memorial, and the In Memory plaque.
So the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which most of us know simply as the Wall, has enabled the healing of a generation and of our nation. It's a tangible symbol of a national dialogue regarding a divisive time in our nation's history. Through the Wall, we remember those who sacrificed all, those who served, those who waited, and those who continue to serve today. After 50 years, we're gaining new perspectives on the legacy of service of our Vietnam veterans, from the continuing journey of their own healing to paying it forward to support veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. Each name on the wall represents a person with dreams and lives cut short, of unreached potential forever frozen in time. By visiting the wall and locating a name, people reflect upon specific memories, and for many, gain some amount of healing. Standing before the wall, you're compelled to remember. He was a boy from your hometown, from Eden Prairie, Minnesota, or Hemlet, California, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Omaha, Nebraska. He played on the football team. In your senior year, he set a state passing record. He dated the girl that sat next to you in history class, and they were married down the street at the church you and your family attended. She announced she was pregnant just before he left for Vietnam. The names remind us of who answered the call to serve our nation. They died doing their duty for their country, but most often for the man on their left or the man on their right. Undoubtedly, some of them died in the company of those of you who are here today. They may have asked you to look after their wife or newborn child, or to care for their loved ones. And as you carried him off the battlefield, or knelt alongside his litter and held his hand, he may have asked you to make sure his family would never forget his sacrifice. His name is now forever remembered on the wall. He is one of 58,281 names. Since its dedication in 1982, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial has been described as one of the world's most powerfully evocative memorials. With 5 million visitors each year, it is still the second most visited memorial in Washington, D.C., behind only the Lincoln Memorial. So the wall was dedicated in 1982. In 1984, the 3 servicemen statue and flagpole were added. 9 years later, the Women's Memorial was added in 1993, and the final piece of what we call the memorial site was added in 2004, the In Memory plaque, honoring those who served in Vietnam, returned home, and who have later died. The wall's a pretty vibrant place, with lots going on all the time. Although the National Park Service has oversight of the wall on behalf of the American people, they count on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund to do most everything. The Memorial Fund maintains the memorial site. We take care of the name additions when they're approved by the Pentagon. We do the status changes when those who are unaccounted for are found and identified. We have put in 2 lighting systems over the years. We do conservation of the 3 servicemen statue quarterly. The In Memory plaque has been updated a couple of times. We do pretty much everything except cutting the grass, which we've actually paid for in the past. The Memorial Fund also conducts the ceremonies and other events, and there are a fair number of them that you may not be aware of. Certainly we're there on Memorial Day and Veterans Day, but we're also there with National Vietnam War Veterans Day in March. We have an In Memory induction ceremony and our Father's Day Rose Remembrance. We have a PTSD Awareness Day, an Agent Orange Awareness Day, and our reading of the names every 5 years, which we're going to do here the week of Veterans Day this year. We also lead education efforts there with school groups at the wall, honor flights. We're on the road with a replica of the wall that we call the Wall That Heals, and online through our Wall of Faces, which we'll talk about more when we get down to the exhibit, and also our free curriculum. So I'm going to talk, I'm going to show a video here about panel 44, and as we go down, I'll talk a little more in detail about what's in the exhibit. But panel 44 is pretty unique, and this will tell you why. In this exhibit, you see panel 44 East. It is an actual panel of granite created to be a part of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. Panel 44 bears the names of 337 American service members who died between March 9th and March 16th, 1968. It was produced in 1982, but was never placed in the memorial because of a crack discovered in the upper right corner of the panel that would have been exposed to weather and possibly cracked. A different panel of granite was inscribed and installed. Many years later, this panel was found for sale online. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund reached out to the seller who donated the panel, and it has been displayed in the Memorial Fund's office until its removal for this exhibit. There are 335 names on this panel. Today, the panel installed in the wall has 337 due to 2 name additions since 1982. Panel 44 includes the names of those who served in the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, and Air Force, as well as 44 states, plus the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. The youngest listed on this panel were 18, and the oldest was 46. Among those listed on panel 44, you will find 1 Medal of Honor recipient, 3 soldiers who earned the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 sailors, and 1 Marine who earned the Navy Cross, and 9 service members who earned the Silver Star Medal for Valor. We call this exhibit Panel 44, 8 Days in March, because this one panel holds the names of that one 8-day period. And so by looking at the diversity of the stories of those who were listed there, you can get an idea of what was going on in 1968. But I want to actually leave you, or conclude my comments, I guess, with this picture. These service members obviously are wearing Desert Storm era camouflage uniforms. For those of us who have worn the uniform of our nation, we know that we owe a debt to those who came before us, and we have a responsibility to those who come after. There was a note that was left at the wall by an Iraq veteran alongside his combat boots that he wore through 2 deployments in Iraq. And the message he left with those boots, I think, sums it up. He said, "If your generation had not come home to jeers, insults, and protests, my generation would not come home to thanks, handshakes, and hugs." And 50 years later, as we talk about the legacy, not of the Vietnam War, but of you, the Vietnam veterans, I think that is one of the single most important aspects of your legacy. You are the ones that made the commitment to yourselves that you would never let our country send another generation of men and women into harm's way without the proper respect and support that they deserve. So I am not a Vietnam veteran, I'm a Desert Storm veteran. And I can tell you, my experience while I was deployed and when I came home could not have been different than the reception that most of our Vietnam veterans received. And that is because of you. So if there is anything to be proud of from your service, and I know there are many, I hope you would consider that one of the most important. Welcome home. I'm happy to answer any questions. Any questions about the wall, any questions about the Memorial Fund. We can talk a little bit about the panel, and as we go downstairs, we can talk more about the exhibit itself. Yes, sir, in the back.
Wasn't there a movement maybe 10 years ago to put a museum underneath the wall? I know my company was looking at it. I was the project manager.
There was. It was called the Education Center at the Wall. It would have been in the field across the street from the wall. And the requirement that was imposed upon it was that it had to be underground. Those of you that have been around our federal government for a long time will recognize this. They said that it had to be underground because they didn't want to obscure the sightline from Constitution Avenue to the Lincoln Memorial. Okay, and you can imagine building in an area that essentially was ground built on a swamp, 2 stories down. That's quite an engineering effort, and it increased the cost dramatically. The ironic thing is, one of the environmental impacts indicated that we would actually have to plant more trees around that entire area between Constitution and the Lincoln Memorial that in 30 years would have completely blocked the view of the Lincoln Memorial from Constitution Avenue. So anyway, we worked on that project for a long time, and we made a lot of progress and had great successes with it. I was talking to a gentleman who was considering making a $75 million donation, which would have been transformative for that project. And he said, well, how am I going to be recognized? So we had gone back to Congress to get specific legislation passed that would allow us to recognize donors inside the Education Center, but we had to submit a donor recognition plan to the Secretary of the Interior for approval. And when that person said, how would I be recognized, we sent the donor recognition plan over to the Department of the Interior, and we threw everything we could think of, any possible way of recognizing a donor in there, everything including the kitchen sink. And the letter we got back through the Park Service denied every single method of donor recognition, which essentially killed the project. So the Park Service never wanted it. That's why they made it more difficult and said it had to be underground. But that project was ended in 2018 when the Park Service finally killed it. Okay, since we're not the government, we can purposely be non-bureaucratic, so we try and keep it to a minimum. What we need is, we need a death certificate, a DD-214 or some other document that shows service in Vietnam or surrounding waters. We ask for a couple of photos and a short bio. And the photos and the bio are what we use to create their page on our website. So the honor roll itself is online only. Those names do not get added to the wall. For obvious reasons, there are so many who have passed away like that, there simply wouldn't be room to add them to the wall. But so many people just simply don't know about that program. What we do is we approve the applications and add their pages online on about a monthly basis. But we have one induction ceremony every year, and that's the Saturday before Father's Day, that day before Father's Day. It's on the East Knoll, just to the east of the wall, and we invite family members to come, and we take the photos and the little bio they give us, and we create a framed tribute for each of the honorees being added to the honor roll that year. And we give the family members that come the picture of their loved one. And the whole focus of that induction ceremony is to invite the family members to come up and show the tribute to their loved one and to read their name for the first time at the wall. okay? This is incredibly powerful for the surviving family members. You know, we all know Memorial Day can be fairly somber. Veterans Day, we remember those who died, but it's also celebratory of the service of all of our veterans. The in-memory ceremony functions more like a wake. It is a period for these family members to have their loved ones' Vietnam service publicly recognized, literally on a national stage in the place that our country has set aside for Vietnam veterans. Now, I'll tell you, for the Vietnam veterans here, if you want to be added to our honor roll when you pass away, let your family know that. I know people who have gone so far as to add a clause in their will to indicate that they want to be added. Some have even put photos and written their own little bio and put it in an envelope in their fireproof box with their important documents and said, this is what you'll need, but I want to be added to the honor roll. So there are just so many families that don't know about it. I would challenge each of you here. I'm sure you all know someone who's lost their Vietnam veteran, and to tell them about that program so that they can nominate their loved one to be added to our honor roll.